This is the miniature quilt block I'm going to show you how to make. The first thing you're going to do is go to the description box down below and you will find out where to get this pattern. This is a template we're going to be using, so we're going to cut out all of the pieces that we need. And you're going to cut around the outside. This is the seam allowance, so you don't want to cut that away. So you're going to cut all of these 4 pieces out. A and B are the same, so I'll just show you how to do A. And then I'll show you how to do C and D afterwards. I've gone through my scrap pile because this is perfect for scrap fabrics. And I've selected some light and dark greens. Well, these are more like teals, if I'm honest. So we're going to take this part here between A1 and A2. What I like to do is fold that line back in between the A1 and the A2. Now the dark green has to go on first and the light green goes on second. I'm just going to turn it around because your work appears on the back of the template. So when you fold it back, the light green will be where it needs to be and the dark green will be where it needs to be. So basically you're going to flip this up and then you're going to sew along this line between A1 and A2. I sew using a Baby Lock Soprano. I'm not paid nor sponsored to produce this video. In the top of the thread, I use just a regular polyester thread. In my sewing needle, I have a 9014 Microtech sewing needle, and I just have a regular foot on there. And I also have bobbin thread in my bobbin. I also like to take these stitches down to about a 1.6. So it's going to be in your sewing machine like this. You're going to drop your presser foot down, make sure the needle is in the center there, and then you are going to sew down and also reverse. Sew all the way and then reverse. Now you're going to have a couple of threads here, 2 at the top here, and then when you turn it over you can have another 2 here. So you're going to have to keep trimming them off to keep it nice and tidy. Then if you have gone over just 1/4 of an inch, you can just take your ruler and you can take off whatever needs to be taken off. And then you can flip the whole section back and then you can turn over that first piece of fabric. Now, this may start to get in your way. So what you can do is you can trim it shorter. So we can trim it, we need to trim it next to this piece of paper, but you don't want to cut any of that paper off because that is your seam allowance. And then go ahead and trim that away. We can use that for another section. Then the next section we need to be looking at is between A2 and A3. So I'm going to fold this section back. And then we will have to trim this off. So you're going to trim it 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to line the next piece of fabric that you need. So it's a light green. And I'm going to line this piece of scrap here right over there. Then you're going to turn it all around. And you're going to stitch along this line. Foundation paper piecing is really fun to do, especially when you're doing these miniature quilt blocks. And it also helps you to get them nice points. So I'm going to turn this over because we need to see where we're working on next. And it's in between 3 and 4. So I'm going to fold this over again. We're going to trim 1/4 of an inch. We're going to see the next colour, which is the dark green. Flip it over. And we're going to align our next piece of fabric up. And then we're going to sew into place. Once again, just flip unit back. And then you're going to just find the next part, which is between A5 and A4. Cut away the excess. And then get the next section of our miniature quilt block. Line it up and stitch across. Then go ahead and flip that back. And then you can go along and trim off the excess along the outside of your mini quilt template. Just be careful not to take off any of the paper, because that is your seam allowance. This is what that first section looks like. Go ahead and do that B unit. Just remember, you just want to fold that B1 and B2 over. I'll just start you off. The dark fabric wants to go first and the lighter fabric wants to go on top, so I'll flip that over. So this is the light side and the dark side, and they want to be facing each other. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to sew. So continue on this mini quilt block and sew this whole unit. So now we have both A and B sections of our mini quilt complete. We can now move on to template C. So we're going to do between C1 and C2. And again, we just fold them over in between for the time being. And we get our fabrics ready. So the light side of the paper, so the light side of the fabric goes first and the darker side goes second, and they're going to be right sides together. And I'm going to flip that paper back, making sure I have 1/4 inch, and sew right along this line, remembering to trim the threads as we go. Flip the fabric back and then turn it back around, and then we're going to fold this over between C2 and C3, and just make sure that the fabrics are behaving before you cut. And you're going to trim that off. Flip the paper back, and then you're going to get another piece of fabric to cover the next area. Turn it back around, and you're going to sew right along this line. Then you're going to flip the fabric back, and then we're going to go to our C4 section. And you're going to trim. And get our fabric. And place that face down. And flip. Now, turn this back over, and you're going to trim once again all the way around the outside of this template. So this is C of our mini quilt, and let's do the last unit, which is D. It's got D1 and D2. I'm going to fold that over and get our next pieces of fabric, which is a dark and a light. The light side of the fabric is going to be facing the paper, and the dark side is going to be on the other side, and they're going to be right sides together. I'm going to flip this up, and we're going to sew right along here. And go ahead and you can flip this up And then we're going to fold over between a D3 and a D2, and we're going to take some of this off, 1/4 of an inch. And then we're going to get a dark piece of fabric to go there. And we're going to stitch a straight line across. And once again, you can flip this over. Now, trim the excess off. Remember, don't cut the paper off. And trim around the outsides of the miniature quilt template. What I like to do is place the units as they are supposed to look as the quilt block. So we are going to take these two sections first, and we're going to join them together. Just going to move these over so we don't get confused, and we need to take the papers out. So we are going to work with D and C. So if you just keep bending the paper over, the foundation paper piecing will come off. It's not going to be difficult at all. These two units line up perfectly, so you can just put them right sides together, making sure that they touch the ends properly, and you can sew this at 1/4 of an inch. Make sure that you've got a stitch on that will sew a 1/4 of an inch unit. So I like to use my sewing foot, 1/4 of inch sewing foot with guide, and I like to use stitch number 30 on my soprano. There you go, that is the unit stitched into place, and you can flip that back. Now I would go ahead and press this down with your iron. And now these two units now match the other side of our block. So once again, you're going to take these out, then once again, right sides together, making sure everything's lined up. If you want to pin, you can pin, it's totally up to you. And sew a 1/4 of an inch. Do that on both sides. And here we go. I'm just going to press this down. You don't have to finish it off like this. I'm just going to show you a finished product. You can turn it into a cushion cover if you want, a quilt, totally up to you. So basically I'm going to do a little bit of decorative stitching in order to hold all these 3 layers together. This is a basic quilt sandwich for my mini block. So back in, batting, and then the top. Once I finish my decorative stitch off, I will then cut away the excess. When it comes to binding something this small, I do not entertain doing binding the correct way. So basically I'm going to leave a little bit of an overlap, and I'm going to bind it like you usually would. When it comes to the ends, I'm going to overlap them, and I want to have a little bit of excess because I want to make sure that I'm hiding them raw seams as well. So something along the line of that. And then I'm going to take like a 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to fold that raw edge in that side, and I'm going to fold that raw edge in on that side as well. Once you have done that, you're simply just going to stitch over the top. Then you're just going to push all your binding like you would to the other side. Now go ahead and hand stitch this all into place. This is the finished miniature quilt block. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and comment down below.